There's a misconception that we don't exist, that somehow our ability to excel at the highest level of our industry is limited, that overcoming barriers as a woman of color would be insurmountable. But what would happen if we decided to venture out on our own despite everything we're up against? I'll tell you. Welcome to the Black Girls Consult 2 podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Angelina Davis, a healthcare consultant, consulting coach, high performance fanatic, wife, and proud girl mom. I help transform female professionals into thriving solo consultants. And just like you, I'm wearing all the hats and doing all the things. So this podcast is to empower the busy female professionals to move past fear to start and grow a successful consulting business, despite the obstacles you may encounter. We'll dive deep into consulting practice, business strategy, mindset, and more. So grab your cup of coffee or tea if that's your thing, and let's get started. All right. Hello there. Welcome to the Black Girls Consult 2 podcast. I am so excited to have this conversation. We have my special guest. We have been together before on LinkedIn. And I know if you go back and you listen to, the previous recording, you have learned a lot about what it takes in order to start your business while you're working a 9-to-5. I think we hammered all of that out, but now we are back at it again. And I am going to let Nicole introduce herself to you and share with us a little bit about who you are, what your business is, and, why you're joining my conversation today about time management, especially when you're working your 9-to-5.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming me again and having me. Like you said, we've had numerous conversations. One or two have been recorded and shared with our community. So I'm really excited to be back and talking about this topic. So my name is Dr. Nicole Bryan. I am a human resources executive. I am also an entrepreneur, and I own my own consulting and coaching business called The Change Doc. I have been in business for almost 2 years now, which I swear it feels so much longer than that. But officially, I've been in business for 2 years. I've been a HR executive for 15 years. And I bring my work experience and my corporate experience navigating the corporate world to mid-career women in particular, and helping them get into the executive suite as well as excel in the executive suite.
Awesome. I always love to hear those beginning stories. Like, what actually made you decide that you were going to start this business while you're working? I mean, you had a phenomenal job, right? So I know that you had climbed the corporate ladder. You were at a place where I'm assuming that you had reached a level of success that you had been working for a long time, but you decided to start this new venture, right? What drove you to do that?
When I think about my career, I get really excited. Right? It's one of the reasons why I've chosen to help other women who are equally excited about their career and who want to make a change in the world. But for me, I speak to a lot of other women who don't have great experiences in the corporate environment in particular, and who find themselves running into challenge after challenge after challenge. I am lucky enough that my career, although it was not rocky free, it was and continues to be like a great journey. I love what I did. I love what I do, but I recognize that everybody's experience is not that way. But so what prompted me to start my own business was a few things. One, I was looking for a new challenge. I had done a lot of what I wanted to accomplish in the corporate world that I was in in the job that I was in at the time, and I wanted to do something different. I am, like probably you and other people who are listening right now, I am one of those continuous learners, and if I'm in a role and I'm not learning and I'm not being challenged, my I start to wander somewhere else. So that was one thing. That was the personal reason. But then my mission became bigger. So in my corporate jobs that I've had, they've all been in human resources, and particularly, I've been the person who was responsible for bringing in talent to the organization and educating talent, like leadership development and those types of things. And so I've always been a coach and a consultant just by the definition of the work that I was doing. And it dawned on me like, well, Nicole, why not cut out the middleman? Like you've been doing this for, big organizations like Colgate Palmolive,
Mhm.
Citibank, T. Rowe Price, right? And they've all been great experiences. You've learned a lot. You've cultivated a lot of global leaders. Why not cut off the middleman and go directly and help women in particular who are still underrepresented in the executive suite, right? So that was the mission based part of it. So it was both a combination of I wanted a new and different challenge. And then there was also how can I continue to build leaders for the world as well as cultivate and get more estrogen in the executive suite.
And that's so neat. One of the statistics I like to use over and over again has to do with the number of women, especially women of color, that make it to the highest level, right? I
Yeah,
think older McKinsey study, kind of states that if I'm quoting this correctly, it was like roughly 20% were women, and
yeah,
then only it was like less than 5% women of color.
yeah, yeah,
So that's huge,
yeah, yeah,
beyond
yeah,
huge. So it's exciting to hear that. And I think you also mentioned something that I always like to share about even my journey as well is the fact that you don't have to quit your 9 to 5 if it's something that you truly desire to do and something that you find to be enjoyable or you're still growing and evolving in that particular role. And so it's great to see examples of that because I think we need to have more and more of that to just let people know that it's possible, right? It's not it's not impossible for you to be able to do both. And then it becomes your choice. I always talk about making your 9 to 5 optional, right?
yeah,
So that means that if you love it, stay. If you want to make a change, but do it on your terms.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people, when it comes to entrepreneurship, have this misconception that in order for me to truly have a real quote unquote business, I need to quit my job and throw everything to the wind and kind of go off into entrepreneurial land. And that is not always the case. It doesn't have to be that way. Like you can map out your own journey.
yeah. So much that you just said. Like I'm like, I think the first thing is I think many of us don't recognize that we as women have not been in the workforce a full 100 years at this point in time,
Right.
right? Like we
Yeah.
haven't. And I think so many of us, my generation, the generations that are coming behind us, this is all we've known. So we don't recognize that it was just the 50s, the 60s,
That's crazy.
really the 70s, 1970s,
Crazy.
where women actually started working full time, where it was actually okay to be
Mhm.
working full time. And even then, we were cast aside to the administrative roles in a professional work environment. Whereas now, again, not even 100 years later, although we still have our underrepresentation in so many areas, STEM and executive suites and et cetera, what I'm finding exciting, frankly, is we can now have a conversation of you don't need to just have one career. You can have two, you can have three, right? And that is okay. You
Yeah.
can build your own business and you can still work a 9 to 5. That is okay. And I love seeing so many more women in particular take advantage of that. And frankly thrive. Neither is easy, neither path, working in a full-time 9 to 5 or going the entrepreneurial road, neither is easy. So
Mhm.
let alone doing both at the same time. But for me, the most important thing is that we have the choice to
Right.
do what makes our heart pitter patter, and we get to take on what we want to take on and not take on what we don't want to take on.
And I think that's what led us to come up with this idea, just letting everyone know. We talked a little bit about what would be a topic that would be the perfect topic following, the LinkedIn Live that we did previously that aired on the podcast.
Yeah.
And the follow up to that, I think, is really thinking about yes, we're telling you this is possible. We're saying that we've been able to do it. We're proof and evidence that you can have not just a 9 to 5, a demanding career, high level career, and still start your own business and be successful at both. So we know that it is possible. That's just a fact at this point. But how to do that in terms of managing your time and being able to fit all of those things in without losing sight of the other things that are very important in life. And I always like to go onto Instagram whenever you're posting and traveling all over the world, of which you go to some amazing destinations. It lets me know, and it's that reminder that yes, we can do all of this and we can still enjoy life to the fullest.
Yeah.
So how do you actually find time to fit in your business in the midst of all that you have going on with your career?
Honestly, it is, to me, it's a commitment like anything else, right? So we commit to raising our kids, we commit to nurturing our relationships, our romantic relationships with our partners. We commit to the 9 to 5. For me, what's worked is figuring out what commitment looks like for the business. And so, with juggling everything, I have 2 stepsons, I have a partner, I have elder care. So, I'm the
Mhm.
primary caregiver for my mom. Like many, I'm sure, of us who are listening, there's just the list goes on in terms of who is depending on me. I'm an executive leader, so I have
Mhm.
teams of people uh, that I'm responsible for. So the list goes on.
Mhm.
But for me, what I tried to do was be very deliberate about when, what, and when I'm going to give to my business,
Right.
and really that came to down to discipline, like being very, you. What we can't control is when other people are needing things of us, but we
Mhm.
can control how we respond, how and when we respond to those demands, essentially. So I started out by just carving out time. Like I literally worked on my business on the weekends.
Mhm.
That was easiest for me. Luckily, I serve a population, other women, other working women who too would probably prefer either evenings or weekends. That's when they have their quote unquote free time, if there's ever such a thing. So, luckily, it coincided with the population that I was serving.
Mhm.
So, while I was working still full time, working my 9 to 5 full time and building my business, I would deliberately carve out business hours for myself. And so that was usually Wednesday and Thursday evenings from 6 to 9 Eastern Standard Time, and Saturday mornings and Sunday afternoons. Like those were my business hours.
Mhm.
And when I was focusing on my business, I was very clear with my team, with my boss, saying I'm not available on these days.
Mhm.
So it wasn't hard in terms of figuring out the how and when. It was hard, as you can imagine, sticking to it when everything wasn't, when an emergency came up or
Mhm.
somebody thought something was an emergency and it really wasn't an emergency, right? We all get those calls. But even then, I think just being able to address the situation, move, close it down, and then go back to the boundaries that I had set it fell back to me being disciplined in terms of how I use my time and how I respond.
Right. I feel the same way. That level of discipline to say that I am going to commit to using my time in this manner
Yeah,
is, I think, vital for you to be able to do both.
yeah,
Oftentimes, people like to think about their weekends as being totally free, and they are able to kind of just Netflix and chill
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah, yeah,
weekend.
yeah,
But I do think that, when you're working on something that you're really passionate about and that you really enjoy, those weekends, I'm similar to you, where I spend a lot of weekend time, working on the business and, even in the business. And that's enjoyable because it's
yeah,
something that I really do love to do. I'm passionate about. As a matter of fact, I have the harder time nowadays focusing on, my 9 to 5 when I'm
same,
there because I
yeah,
want to be doing the business.
yeah, same.
So, so I think that having just that mindset shift from I work a job, and on the weekend, I do nothing but kind of veg out, which in all honesty, most of us didn't do anyway. I always would take work home
Yeah.
from work.
Yeah.
And so one of those boundaries I had, and I think you mentioned this, is kind of everything needs to fit into the week for work. And I was trying my best to limit having that overflow. So the more efficient and more productive I could be during my week, that was going to be my way of protecting that time, especially, on the weekend or at night. And so I don't want to give anyone the impression that those times will not be important for this process. I haven't met anyone yet that's been able to do that without having anything, either at night or on the weekend. Even if you block off your weekends, maybe you're doing things at night or in the early morning.
Yeah.
But there has to be some other time that we can carve out. Now, I know my biggest issue is boundaries around my family. So I have boundaries set with coworkers and clients. My boundaries are with my family. So do you ever run into that problem?
I don't, because my partner is an entrepreneur, right?
Okay.
So his work schedule, and um, he owns personal training business.
Hmm.
So personal trainers, they're up at the crack of dawn, and
Hmm.
their hours are more, they center their hours around their clients' availability. So
Right.
his is more sporadic.
Hmm.
So I honestly, and my kids are grown enough that they don't need me or him on a every minute.
Right.
Doesn't mean that they don't call, and they don't, they do
Hmm.
need things that come unexpectedly. But yeah, I yeah, you know what? No, I'm trying to think. I mean, occasionally yes, but no, uh, like they want to spend time with you, or they need you to like take them somewhere or do. Okay,
It's like that last minute. And I have even
yeah,
still, my youngest is 13. So I always give the example. She just had a tryout for volleyball for school, and we had to get her,
yeah, yeah.
her physical done. And we get there. Now I scheduled it at 7:40 a.m. because my goal was to get
Get
it
it
out
done
the
and over with.
way so I
Yeah,
can, yeah,
yeah,
so it wouldn't interrupt the day. We drive 20, 30 minutes out to go get this physical done. And she leaves her glasses at home, of which I'm thinking to myself, you knew you couldn't see. That's just something that right?
I take a 30-minute car ride for you to recognize that you
Right,
can't.
that you couldn't see. What the hell? She gets there and tries to take the test without her glasses, and of course fails. I'm sitting on the side, and the letters she was calling out, I was like, okay, we got to go back home. Like this is not going to work. So we had to go back home. Make a long story short, it turned into an all day ordeal, which threw off the whole day.
Yeah,
So that tends to happen. I'm always trying to find ways to think ahead of the game. I've even gone as far as like, hey, we need to pack a bag. I need extra clothes and shoes and all of this for the kids in the car so that if anything happens, we're going to have an extra pair.
yeah.
And glasses was an extra pair of glasses is now on the list.
I mean, but that's a great point, right? Meaning, no matter, you can plan, and planning is
Mhm.
important. Having your boundaries are important.
Yeah.
Knowing like when you're going to be working on one thing versus when you're going to be working on another. All of that is important. And frankly, to keep your sanity, if nothing else, to keep your sanity, you need to do that. But I think your point is really valid, Angelina, that the truth of the matter is sometimes no matter how you plan, something comes up that demands your time. And it's
Right.
something that you didn't plan on doing that day or that half a day or hour or whatever.
Hmm.
And so I think what I would say to that is you have to have some level of flexibility, right? Like something's going to come that's going to take you off track. Even sometimes my mind takes me off track. Like
Hmm.
I will say, I will carve out time. When you see my calendar, it's all color coded. Like you would think that it's like regimented. The truth
Right.
of the matter is, I blocked out, even today, I blocked out 3 hours to do an email sequence
Hmm.
that I need for a launch that I'm doing soon. I just couldn't concentrate on it. Like tried to do it. I couldn't, I know what I need to do. I carved the time out, but I couldn't get my brain to focus on it. And after like 45 minutes, I was like, you got to give this up. You got to go do
Right.
something else because it's not working. Like, why are
Mhm.
you hitting your head, or, why are you banging your head on the wall? So sometimes it's other people, but that distracts us or pulls us away. But sometimes it's us as
Yeah.
well. And so I think you just gotta recognize when to push through, and versus when to just let what's happening happen, and take a step back and then regroup and get back to it when it's appropriate.
It's so true. I always have clients create a list of to-dos that are kind of things they can do when they don't have that creative energy or they have just been exhausted from the week or through the
Yeah.
day, but still are things that have to be done. So I always like to use examples of doing your market research or maybe, some aspect of getting content ideas or starting to organize certain aspects of their business, things that you can do while you're kind
Yeah.
of relaxing and not having to use a lot of your mental energy
Yeah.
to do it because those things still have to be done.
Yeah.
And instead of them taking up your quality like working hours, let those things be for when you're sitting in a waiting room and you're waiting for the kids to to finish up a practice or whatnot. Like do those types of things then instead of just scrolling randomly on social media or texting with a friend. And you can get so much more done, and it doesn't mean that you don't relax, but you're just using some of that downtime a little bit more efficiently
Yeah.
to get those things done, which I always feel like, it helps in the long run. Because number one, you take things off your plate. So you're not thinking about it, which is going to help you rest and sleep better, which we all know we definitely, definitely need that, that level of energy. So have you ever had a situation where there's been a crisis at work as well as a kind of a fire in your business as well? So like two periods where you're in high demand and there's like a lot going on both ends. How
Yeah.
did you handle that if it's happened?
So yes, that happens. And it happens. Actually, I would say it happens fairly often. So one thing that I didn't share was that in addition to being an HR executive and a business owner, is that I'm also a psychotherapist.
Okay.
So I've kind of had my own. I call myself a dual career instead of a dual career family. I call myself a dual career person, as I
Mhm.
think that term is getting more popular at this point in time. But I've been that way since I became a psychotherapist back in 2008.
Okay.
Um, but all of that to say, yes, I have had some very hairy issues, particularly when I had my psychotherapy practice,
Mhm.
right? So there was a time, for example, when I was in a board meeting at the company that I was working for at the
Mhm.
time, doing a presentation, and I had a patient who needed some emergency psychological assistance and support. Um, and I remember at the time, I could see my phone going off all the time, and I was like, "What's happening?" I figured it was something related to my kids, but I'm in
Right.
a board meeting, so I'm not necessarily, to pick up their phone in the board meeting is that's like career suicide essentially.
Right. Right. Right.
And then my executive assistant came in, and I was like, okay, something's really wrong. So, and then she told me what was happening. One of my patients had tried to commit suicide, was being held in the hospital. And so, in that moment, I literally had to be like,
It would pause. Right.
no, right? Like meeting is the meeting, and I was scheduled to present at that meeting, but I just had to walk out and go take care of my patient. So those I've had a couple of those instances actually. Never the other way around, because when it comes to psychological care, that's the first, that is my priority. And that's
Mhm.
actually a tip that I would give us is I've had to, in non-emergent, when there's non-emergency times, I've
Mhm.
had to be very clear about what is my order of priority.
Right.
Like, what are the things that are most important to me?
Mhm.
Family is at the top of that, right? So if anything
Mhm.
happens, any place, I don't care who I'm with, what I'm doing, doesn't matter. That's number one. And then for me, obviously my patients, and then my executive responsibilities, then my business. Some
Uh-huh.
people have it the other way around. That's perfectly fine. But just knowing what the order is, so that when those crises moments do come, You don't
Mhm.
have to think of it like you already know what your pecking order is and how
Right.
you would respond to it. But when there's been other situations, Angelina, when I have not had, it's not about the not about providing psychological and psychotherapy support to
Mhm.
anyone, or no emergency, personal emergency situations. But when you're coaching
Mhm.
people, the reality is part of your services that you provide is being there and being available to support your clients.
Right.
And sometimes, most times, you can schedule that. You're having regular sessions with them, and it's scheduled, it's on the calendar, etc. But there
Mhm.
are a lot of times that they may need you in the moment. If they are, my clients, for example, will find themselves in the midst of negotiations
Mhm.
for their total compensation, right? And they need to go back with, they have a couple of hours to make a decision on something and go back and give a counter offer or something like
Right.
that. If I am otherwise engaged at my 9 to 5, then I'm not available. I'm not checking email. We don't have beepers these days. The text is coming on in, but when I'm focused at my 9 to 5, my cell phone is off. So I'm
Mhm.
not thinking about that. And so there have been times where my clients have needed me like in the moment.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's an emergence, true emergency, or a true deadline that they're facing, and other times it just feels like an emergency to them,
Right.
although it may not be, have a deadline on it. And I've had to make decisions about, okay, do I step out of this meeting or step out of this conversation in my nine to
Mhm.
five and go deal with that. Most times I will say that I will not do that, because if there isn't a sense of, if there isn't a true urgency, like a true, um, someone's going to lose that opportunity if they don't make a decision, and a part of my responsibility as a coach is to help you make those decisions on
Mhm.
your own, right?
Mhm.
We talk about all those scenarios. So most times I will not. There's only been one or two times that I can think of right now where my clients superseded, like they didn't just send me an email, they actually called my admin to get me out of wherever I was. That to me is always a signal that is super important, at least from their
Right.
perspective. But most times it's I will always favor where I am. If I'm focusing on the job, that's where my focus is right then and there.
Right.
If it's the time to focus on my clients, that's where I'll focus and not respond to things about my job. I'll say one more thing.
Uh-huh.
So I have as an HR exec, I have a large team, like have a team of over 200 people that I'm responsible for, right? I even train my team basically, right? So I'm very transparent about these are my priorities. This is what I'm doing when, I have a whole nother business when I'm not here. Um, and I give them permission to reach out to me when it is an emergency.
Mhm.
What's interesting, and hopefully my bosses and my former bosses are not listening, I don't do the opposite. So what I mean by that is I will stop something that I'm doing. If I get a call, or if I am informed about an urgent need for someone on my team who reports into me, I will
Mhm.
stop what I'm doing, because I know that I'm doing something else, and that they have made the conscious decision that despite what's going on, I need Nicole's input to be able to move forward.
Right.
I will not do that for my boss. So if my boss, and this has happened, when my boss calls me, I'm not stopping. And not because I don't care about what she needs, but because she has decision power
Mhm.
without me to make a decision, essentially.
Right.
Right? She wants to consult with me, which I completely respect, and I want her to consult with me. But I
Mhm.
know that if she doesn't get me, it's not going to stop her ultimately from making a decision.
Right.
Whereas my team, they need me to be able, like they are very aware that if Nicole doesn't say yes to this, we can't move forward, right? She
Mhm.
can move forward without me. They can't move forward without me. So that's another kind of dynamic that I deal with between the business and my full time.
Yeah, and I always like to think of it as we have this ability to set boundaries on either side. And that even goes for, what we set for ourselves, like, so the boundaries that we give ourselves in terms of how far we want to go, what we want to involve ourselves in, what we want to, extend to people, that in essence compromises how much time or what takes us away from the priorities that we have, right? And I think setting expectations plays a big role in that, meaning that if you have a client and you have the expectation that I will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours,
Right.
there is that expectation of this being a longer time frame than an immediate response. And so although we may still show up, immediately when we are able to, it's not the expectation. And so I think by really being clear about that, when people are starting out, it can be extremely helpful and just relieve some of that anxiety of feeling as if we need to be there all of the time for everyone. Because I think that's just human nature, and especially for women, especially women of color, it's like this superwoman syndrome. We want to be, present everywhere at all times.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can't be omnipresent. Only one being can do that. Like, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, like, you can't do that, and so there has to be boundaries that you set and expectations that you give, so that you don't carry that burden of feeling as if you need to show up in ways that you just physically and mentally can't. So I think that, yeah, and the priority piece is so important. I love the way that you said that, because you do have to choose, right? No one's saying what's right or wrong. You can choose your career, you can choose your business, you can choose your clients. I mean, the choice is up to you, but it's a choice,
Yeah.
And I think that we forget that. Like, we sometimes feel as if, for instance, if it were to be your business in that moment, I mean, not your business, but your job in the moment that you described, if your patient was having, or your client was having, difficulty that was life threatening, some people would feel like, well, this is my job. I can't break away, right? But we still always have that choice. We just may not take that opportunity, but we have the choice. And I think just realizing that we have more control over things than we think we do.
Yeah.
That it's not as limiting as we may feel at times or may have felt in the past. Because I think there's a lot that I've told myself, for instance, in the past, that I can't do that. That's not allowed. And I'm thinking to myself now, like, why did I ever think that that was not allowed?
Yeah.
But someone may not have liked it. It may not
Yeah.
have been in consistent with what my organization wanted at that moment.
Right.
But as an adult, then I had a choice that I could make. And I think that really getting to that point is very freeing. At least I felt that way. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but
And like, I will, once again, I think that's an important distinction, right? So
Mhm.
for all of our listeners, I would say, when you hear yourself, because I've done this as well, right? But when you hear yourself saying, I can't, I think you got to pause the
Right.
button and ask yourself, really can't, why I can't? Well, why can't I?
Mhm.
And I do that with people. I do that with women that I work with now. And usually they'll have a response like, well, I can't do that because the rule is such and such and such. And I'm like, okay, where's that rule written? Who told you that
Right.
rule? Let me see it in writing.
Mhm.
What's the consequences if that does, like, right? Like, and most
Mhm.
of the times it's a rule that either we've been conditioned to, or we assumed.
Mhm.
No one has ever said, no, you can't take 2 days off to work on your business and
Right.
clock it as vacation days. You're saying you can't do that because
Mhm.
vacation isn't supposed to be used that way, but you can use your vacation any way you
However you
want to use
want.
your vacation.
Exactly.
No, your boss did not say you can't take those days off to go
Mhm.
work, da, da, da. And even if they did, that's their preference. Not, I'm sure it's not in the company handbook. Like
Mhm.
that's not a rule per se. But
Right.
all of that to say, I think when when we hear ourselves say, I can't, or we shouldn't,
Yeah.
those any of those types of phrases, I think we have to help train ourselves to pause and really question ourselves on why. Who said that? Why do I believe it? Is it really true? Is it
Mhm.
fact, or is it what I think is the right thing or the wrong thing to do or whatever, right?
Yeah,
That,
those
that
are those three words are things that I
yeah,
am just not a fan of. Can, shouldn't, and
yeah,
should. Like
yeah, yeah,
those are all usually going to lead you down this path
yeah,
of, kind of like these assumptions
yeah,
or other people's, kind of like beliefs and opinions that you are kind of taking as gospel.
yeah.
So that's huge. I have a question. So now we've talked about like being able to manage both. You've been able to do that successfully, but have you found that there are certain time management techniques or maybe other types of solutions? I don't know if you're big into tech and apps. So, it's just what keeps you going and able to balance it all.
Yes. So I don't know if you would consider this a time management technique, but for me, working out, as you probably, I know you already know this because you
Yep,
see,
I see you all the time. Like y'all, she is always in the gym. Now I know because of your
I post it every day. It's part of my content that I post. But in all
right.
seriousness, like I have, for me to have the energy
Mhm.
and the clarity to be able to work multiple careers at the same time,
Mhm.
working out is what does that for me, right? It gives me mental clarity, it gives me physical energy, it makes me feel positive enough
Mhm.
to tackle the entire day, whatever is going to be coming for that day. So that to me is I put that in my time management bucket. It's
Mhm.
definitely in the bucket of what helps me juggle everything, for lack of
Right.
a better word. So that's one thing for sure. So I'm physically active. Before I go do anything for anybody else, including my kids,
Uh-huh.
that's what I'm doing. I'm working out, period. Okay.
Right.
That's a non negotiable. Then, in terms of, I guess, more traditional time management
Yeah.
things, I do plan out my week.
Mhm.
So I will spend like Sunday morning in particular planning out for two things.
Mhm.
On the Friday before I leave work,
Mhm.
right, I will always look at the 2 weeks ahead. So I'll take the time to kind of look what meetings I have coming up or appointments I have coming up for two reasons. One, just a general awareness, right?
Mhm.
I to figure out like what I might need to add to my to-do list or take off onto my to-do list based on what's coming up. But then two, to see if I need to shuffle things around.
Mhm.
Because I'm juggling two, three different kind of different roles, I may need to, you know, move an appointment here or change something there. That's one thing I do. The
Mhm.
second thing I do is on Sundays, Sunday mornings, I will plan out that same week. So I looked ahead 2 weeks, then Sundays, I take the time to actually look at my meetings and see, okay, do I need to create an agenda for this meeting, or
Mhm.
what are the topics I want to cover with this client, for her next coaching session. So I will get myself organized.
Right.
That helps me a lot. It helps
Mhm.
me reduce the stress that comes through the week because once again, I'll be able to plan for the things that are on my calendar, but things are going to probably pop up that I don't know about. But
Mhm.
feeling prepared for the things that I do know about helps me with all of that. I
Right.
also, I think I mentioned earlier, I color code my calendar.
Mhm.
So I can see what's on it, like just by a glance, and
Mhm.
I'll know, okay, if it's blue, I know it's a coaching session. If
Mhm.
it's red, then I know it's a HR business HR execs thing. If it
Mhm.
right, so I know what's happening. And then the last thing I will say is I mentioned it earlier too, but I'll just repeat it, which is I block time out. I block
Mhm.
work time, right? My solo work time, not
Right.
meeting work time, but solo work time
Mhm.
to, um, uh, you know, work. What do we call it? Work on the
One.
business rather
Yeah.
than in the business.
Mhm.
So that helps as well. So leave I don't leave things to chance in terms
Mhm.
of like if I have things that I need to get done, even if it's just me who's going to be working on it, I will block the time on my calendar to make sure that I have the space to do it, but also that I don't forget to do it.
Right.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
about you? What do you
You
use?
know, I'm A lot of the strategies that you mentioned, I also do. Another thing that has been helpful for me is also compartmentalizing my home duties as well.
Mhm.
So everything from, cooking dinner to, getting ready for the week and handling the kids. There have been times, like for instance, this summer, my daughter's been home from college. I've been able to lean on her to cook dinner at night. So I take advantage of those things like when I can back before I am have been known to be crock pot queen. Now, yes,
Crock pot and air fryer. I'm not
yes,
sure what we did without those two before
no
those
clue.
two things, but yes, yeah,
When I've been in the heat, I'll be honest and a little bit transparent. I have been in this type of I don't know. I don't know if you want to call it like a go phase for a long time. So some of it is just second nature to me now,
yeah,
But one thing that I used to do a lot was to put on a crock pot meal, for instance, the night before. It would cook
yep,
overnight and I'll
yep,
put it in the refrigerator. Well, dinner's already ready and I
yep,
didn't have to do anything but like do the prepping of putting it in, 15 minutes before bedtime.
yep,
So there are a lot of, I feel like those shortcuts that you can take to create the room.
yeah,
And then the key is just not allowing other things to fill that space. And I feel like that's been the hardest part for me with staying kind of productive and handling my time. Is just once I clear out the space by using, a lot of these different methods, how do I keep other things from filling in, once that gap is made?
yeah,
And one of the things too you mentioned about looking at the week ahead, that is super helpful because before that, I will say that I have had many a time that I have been scattered, like you become paranoid. And there was so much anxiety. I didn't want to miss a meeting. And I would have everything coming to my watch because if I needed to be there, I needed someone to like buzz me and make sure that I'm there. Now I have, I don't have a watch on and I just feel less anxious because I know what to expect from the week. So there are other things that may pop up, but before I start my week, I already know what meetings are coming up. I've already prepped for the meetings that are coming up.
yeah,
And I started just using my Fridays, to do that, like having a second half of the day where I literally would run through a number of items that I knew I needed to make sure that I had checked, that I have my calendar updated, that I've reached out to everyone to make sure that we're still on for the next week,
yeah,
that you're kind of confirming all these things. And that I also have things for my family lined up, like who's going to pick up the kids and, who needs to be on alert just in case my meeting runs late, all of that releases and release me of so much anxiety and stress that it has made the world of difference in terms of balancing all of it.
You made me think about something else when you mentioned not having your watch on,
Mhm.
because I think so many of us and I do think this falls in the time management bucket. It's not what it's not on the what you do side, but what you maybe don't do
Oh, do.
essentially. And for me, it is maybe it might have been 6 months ago.
Mhm.
It sounds like you do this now,
Mhm.
Angelina, but maybe 6 months ago, I was listening to a young lady on Instagram, and young lady, I feel like that made me sound like I'm
I do it
80.
too.
Um, I was listening to someone on Instagram, and she was talking about the fact that she does not she turns off all her notifications, right?
Mhm.
So she makes her living on Instagram,
Mhm.
but she does not allow Instagram to ping her. So all her notifications are off. And
Mhm.
I was like, it goes back to one of those things that people say you should do something, but
Mhm.
like, and I thought to myself, if you make your living off of Instagram, I don't make
Mhm.
my living off of Instagram.
Mhm.
Yet that thing is pinging me all the time, meaning not when I say ping, meaning that the notifications are coming through. I might
Right.
have my phone on silent, which I always do, but when I
Mhm.
pick up the phone, the notifications are there. Like I can see them coming in, or there's a number, right?
Yeah.
That says 25 notifications are waiting
Mhm.
for you. I turned all of that off,
Mhm.
not just from Instagram, but from all of my
Mhm.
apps. Girl, it was like a whole nother life.
Exactly.
Because it's not that I don't, now I choose when I go on to those platforms
Hmm.
versus being like Pavlov's dog. And every time the ping comes through, I'm like, oh, let me see what's happening. Now, literally, I may go on there 2, maybe 3 times a day, but it's like quick, go in, get out. I'm
Hmm.
not every 5 seconds or every 5 minutes going on because someone pinged me on, so I got a notification.
Right.
I swear, I think that gave me back at least an hour or two in my entire day. Like, because I'm
Yes.
just not, I'm not responding. I'm being
Hmm.
proactive and making the choice of when I take to go look on social media versus
Hmm.
waiting for them to ping me. I don't know if that's what,
No, definitely,
yeah,
definitely. I will get, certain messages a lot of times, somewhat on Instagram, but I've gotten in the habit of choosing when I look and when I don't. I feel like
yeah.
I can control that piece. The one that I could not control very well was Facebook, and mainly because
Um,
I'm not even on Facebook like that, but that's where family and friends are,
yeah.
and usually when those come through, there's a certain level of almost like obligation. You feel like you need to
For
respond.
me, no.
Right. Well, look, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Susie's graduation is awesome.
Right,
Respond to it
right.
right now. So
Yes.
I literally, actually, to be honest with you, I only log on Facebook oftentimes like maybe once a week.
Yeah.
And I literally, for a set period of time, go through and come in and like and catch up on birthdays and do all of that. And then I'm off again. And I think that has helped me a lot. And while we're talking about the benefit of that, there's always also a downside because I think we both work with clients that likely function in a very similar fashion. So, what I always like to tell people is that don't assume that your ideal client is sitting online and seeing everything that you do, number one, because 9 times out of 10, they're not. Like they may log in on the weekend or maybe at night when they're just scrolling. So, you do have to have some level of consistency, or even think about where the best place to meet them may be. It may not be online, it may be offline because they're not going to necessarily be present on social media to the extent that they normally would. So you have to think about those things in greater depth based upon just the type of lives that we live nowadays. Everybody is very busy, and so just kind of figuring out how to navigate that space for ourselves, but then also in reaching the people that we want to work with in order to build our businesses. I feel like there's an element of that we also have to be, mindful of.
Yeah.
And now we talked about that piece in terms of just turning off notification was what keeps the anxiety down. But
Yeah.
how do you really control, this element of possible burnout? So, you're doing so many things. So technically you have two full careers, you have the business, like how and family. How do you keep yourself from burning out? Like,
So, so what I would say is that it's important to know what brings you calm and what brings you peace.
hmm.
For me, sorry, it's important to know it, and then it's important to make time to do it.
Hmm.
For me, it is working out. Right. That's for many people that is a chore. For me, it is not. For me, it is.
I'm trying to get back there. It is.
I know. I'm going to acknowledge it because I know it's the truth. For most people, that's not enjoyment. I get it, but for me, it is. So that's one thing. So I make that's a daily practice.
Mhm.
For other people, it might be yoga. So other people, it might be Netflix. Whatever brings you calm and peace,
Mhm.
I think you have to make that a part of your daily. You have to figure a way to make that your daily routine.
Right.
That's one thing I will say. The other thing for me is that just like I schedule all my work time, I actually also schedule downtime.
Mhm.
So I am a loner, right?
Mhm.
And I am a introvert. And so for me, I have to have time by myself to be
Mhm.
able to face the week ahead or blah, blah, blah. So for me, like I think I had mentioned to you guys that I work on Sundays when I look at my calendar ahead and da da da. Sunday evenings is Nicole time.
Mhm.
And so I will spend the morning planning the week ahead, figuring out what I need to do at home and for work. But then come 3 o'clock, I cut it off. And so from 3 to whenever I go to bed, that is my time. And I use that time to escape into reading, right? I'm not a big TV person, but I love novels. And reading is a solo sport, thank God. And so that's what I'll do. That gives me back, that gives me energy. Like that allows
Mhm.
me to rest. It allows me to block my mind from worrying about what's coming or what happened last week that I can't change anyway. And so those are the things that kind of help rejuvenate me. Like those are the things that I can work into my regular, either daily or weekly schedule.
Mhm.
But the other big thing that I do, and you had mentioned this before, is I travel.
Mhm.
So every couple of months, I'm taking some big trip, whether by myself or with friends or with my sweetheart. We are going somewhere, and it's somewhere good, right?
Yes, you all are. You all are everywhere.
Not just a road trip an hour away and then boom, right? We're going someplace good. So, for example, at the end of this month, I'm heading to London for 2 weeks. So I'll be there. I'm taking my mom. It'll be great, right? But when I'm there, like I'm there. So to me, the other thing is when you are doing these things that you want to kind of rejuvenate yourself, you have to be as present in those moments as you are for your business and as you are for your 9 to 5. Otherwise, they won't rejuvenate you.
Yeah,
That make
I'm kind of like that too. I haven't done a lot of traveling, overseas recently. I think this year, I've only gone one place, but for me, it's been the travel with, my daughter's playing volleyball
Yes.
or being able to go up and spend time with my older daughter who's now in college. And I'm like you, when I'm there, like when we go into volleyball
Yeah,
tournaments, I
it's
tell
all about
everybody
that.
that it's just like I'm in volleyball world. I don't know. It could be an atomic bomb outside and I have no clue because
Yep.
it's all about volleyball in that moment. So, that is something that I really do look forward to because, like you said, it's kind of like your whole family is there or you're just involved in that moment. If you're traveling, you're loving the area that you're traveling to and you're just immersing yourself in that. But I always, remind clients it's also a great time to just capture just video footage, something that simple. Or when you get like a creative download and you want to just write while you're there, do it. Just pull out your phone or pull out a pen and just sit on the beach and write. You'll be amazed as to how creative you become
Yeah.
when you're in those elements. And that's still a aspect of working on your business that you don't even realize you're doing, right? Because a lot of these pictures that you take, just store them away and you can use them at some other time. I'm not posting them then, but they will show up, weeks down the road, possibly, or, when you get back, or maybe that idea that sparked while you were talking to a friend and you all were just kind of hanging out. That idea turns into your next offer that may not see the light of day for a year, but those moments are more than necessary because otherwise I feel like it's easy to burn out. And I guess I'm very mindful of that because I tell people like, when I started Excella Consulting, I started my business. Part of it was because my mentor at the time, who was also my colleague that I worked with in consulting, actually, she ended up experiencing severe burnout that, led to the end of her career. And I never wanted that to happen to me. And because I saw how it occurred for her, and it's not to say that every situation is the same by no means, but just seeing that not having those opportunities to take a break and putting so much pressure on yourself to perform and not just perform well, but perform exceptionally and to, never take breaks and to go above and beyond all the time. It's just all of those things becomes too much weight for any one person to bear. And so I try to allow myself to have those moments where I can just break free, be more creative, follow my energy, So there are times where, even with the podcast, yes, the podcast is released each week, but if by chance the energy is not there to do the podcast, sometimes I don't force myself to do it. It may be an episode that's going to be a rebroadcast. But I think just listening to our bodies, understanding those dynamics with our families, if we have families, and where maybe some of that attention needs to be placed in that moment in time. I think just having the the willingness to allow yourself to be present in the moments that really matter in life
Yeah.
can make a huge difference. If you were to give someone any advice starting out who is embarking on this journey of starting their business, especially their consulting business with a 9 to 5, what would be the one thing that you would tell them if you could only tell them one thing? I know we talked about 10 billion, but what would be that one thing?
If it would be one thing, to me, it would be get the help you need.
Mm.
I think so many of us women, particularly women of color, we feel the need. We're overachievers, and we feel the need to do things on our own. Sometimes it's because we just like to learn, and we like to, it's exciting. It's a new experience, and we're like all in, or, like all of our energy is there. Other times it's because we're stubborn and we don't want to admit that we don't necessarily know what we're doing, and we don't ask for help. And what I would say is, when you are, first of all, there are enough women and women of color at this point in time who are, in fact, holding down a 9 to 5 and working on their own business, that you don't have to do it by yourself.
Right.
You don't even have to pay for, a coach. I'm not talking necessarily about paying for a coach. You can. I mean, both of us are coaches, so obviously, right, that is definitely an option. But what I'm talking about is build a community around yourself. If you see people on Instagram who you're like, oh, she's trying to do something similar to me, reach out, introduce yourself. If you are able to find groups of women who, and there are so many out there who are just supporting each other, right? Virtually, as well as now people are starting to get back in person and doing. I see a lot of local women entrepreneurs doing doing local events in their cities, in their states. Um, just find a community of people. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about you, Angelina. Like, we met through a coaching program, and that coaching program is long over, and
Yes.
we've stayed connected. I can think of several. I can name you 10 other women who, at this point in time in my journey building my business, I know who are just supportive of what's happening. If I have a question, if I don't know how to do a podcast, I know I can call Angelina. If I don't know, if I'm having problem with getting a post, social media post, I know who I can call. Like, if I just want to vent because today is a crazy day between work and the business, I have resources around me that can do that, and they're not paid resources. So I would say, don't feel the need to do it on your own. Get a community of support around you, even if you feel like you don't need it, because when you do need it, it's going to sneak up on you, and you want to have that already kind of established for yourself.
Yeah, you have to have that support system. It's not even about having like a cheering squad. It really is about finding the help that you need in that moment. Someone that you can literally call, text, send a message
Yeah.
to, and just say, listen, I either need to vent, I need some advice, I need you to point me in the right direction. And the thing I found, similar to what you were just saying, is that most people are more than willing to do that. Um, there is, you have that mindset of abundance where my helping you or helping someone else has nothing to do with my level of success, right? And we are all on that same mission of getting more and more women, especially, women of color, to be able to reach new heights. So if how are we going to do that unless we help each other, right? That's been our biggest hindrance, not having any help. And so really kind of breaking that is key. Oh my gosh, I have really enjoyed, this conversation, but I can't let you go without sharing where people can find you, what you're up to right now, like what services you offer and the whole nine, like fill us in.
So yes, as I said, my Dr. Nicole A. Bryan, my business is called The Change Doc. You can find me on the best place to find me and connect with me is on LinkedIn. And please reach out. I know everyone says that, but I really, really would love to kind of hear what you guys are doing, what your businesses are, where you work, if you're juggling two things. So just reach out, let me know that you heard me on Dr. Angelina's podcast, and we can connect. So I am same name, Dr. Nicole A. Bryan on LinkedIn. I have a couple of programs that are coming up. You can find out information about me and the business and the programs at www.thechangedoc.com. I will say that one program that if you are someone who is working full time and you plan to continue to do both, work full time as well as go the entrepreneurial route, and in your full-time role, you want to move up in terms of leadership or into the executive suite, then definitely check me out because that's what my whole business is about. And you would probably be very interested in a couple of the programs that I have right now.
Yes, awesome. And I will include that in the description. So for anyone who is tuning in, the information will be in the description so that they can have an easy way to just click a link and reach you. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining the podcast again. And I can't wait to talk again soon.
All right. Looking forward to it. Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Black Girls Consult 2 podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave your review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share it with a friend. We're on a mission to increase the success and longevity of women in consulting, and you can help us do that. Also, I'd love to hear from you, so let's connect at Dr. Angelina Davis on Instagram or LinkedIn. And don't forget to visit excelatconsulting.com for more information to support your consulting journey. Until next time, take care.